Good afternoon, attendees, and welcome to this Changing Cities webinar hosted by ICLEI Africa with various partners. Today's session is focusing on multi-level governance and specifically how multi-level governance can enable climate resilience development. We're very excited to have a diverse panel of speakers with us. We have some academics and researchers, some city-level officials, and others working in the development space. So we should have a diverse set of perspectives in terms of how multi-level governance is absolutely key in unlocking climate resilient development, in particular in African cities that are so vulnerable to the impacts of climate change, and as we all know, have done the least globally to cause climate change, contributing about 3 to 4% of global greenhouse gas emissions. This particular webinar is hosted in collaboration with a project that's being implemented by ICLEI Africa and partners, the Improved Municipal Planning and Action Project, funded by the IDRC, and we are collaborating with the University of Cape Town, the University of Chinyoi in Zimbabwe, and the University of Malawi in the implementation of this project. And in fact, some of the speakers on our panel are collaborators and perhaps can reflect on some of the project's learnings. Another really important project to highlight, and I'm actually hoping our first speaker, Dr. Anna Taylor, might provide some reflections from it, is Fractal, the Future Resilience for African Cities and Lands project that's being led by the University of Cape Town and has been running for a few years now, working in 9 different Southern African cities, really trying to look at how we can better produce climate change information and data and stories so that cities are able to plan taking climate change impacts and projections into account. So these 2 projects are really benchmarking our thinking in terms of today's webinars, but of course we're very grateful to hear inputs from the panelists, also from their own experiences in their cities themselves. So let me start off then by introducing some of our panelists. On screen is myself, but I'm the director of the Climate Change, Energy and Resilience Workstream here at ICLEI Africa, and really so grateful to everyone that has made time for these virtual engagements, particularly in this world in which most of us sit in Zooms for most of the day, so do appreciate it. Maybe just one other side note is to say we really want to make this session interactive. We want to leave enough time for questions and answers towards the end of the webinar, so please post in the chat. Please post in the Q&A functionality that's at the bottom of your toolbar. If you are struggling with any functionality or connectivity, Kate, my colleague, is going to stick her email address in the chat box now. Please email her. Her emails are up and she can help you. But otherwise, please send questions in, type them in the chat or in the Q&A functionality. If they're directed to a specific speaker, please let us know. Otherwise, if it's a general comment or question that we can pose to any one of the speakers, that's also absolutely fine, but we really just want to encourage participation and would love to hear where you're from. In all our webinars we've been hosting as ICLEI Africa, we've seen such diverse representation, not just from the African continent, but from around the world, and we do love to hear from those that are engaging. Also just want to say, if we can't get to all the questions, which we'll try our very best to do, we will endeavour to get back to you via email. We have your details when you registered for the webinar. Okay, then let's start off by introducing our panelists. So first up is Dr. Anna Taylor, and every time I speak to Anna on the phone, I say to her, so which institution at the University of Cape Town are you now associated with? Anna's associated with a number of different leading institutions at the University of Cape Town, in particular today, ACDI, which is our partner institution with ICLEI Africa, particularly on the impact project that I referred to. And Anna's also done quite significant work looking at building climate resilience and climate change action in the city of Cape Town, and she'll be reflecting a little bit both in terms of her experience in her Cape Town research, but also her leading role in the Fractal project that I mentioned that's operating in 9 different Southern African cities, and I'm sure she will also reflect on her work linked to the IPCC and others. So we look forward to hearing from Dr. Anna Taylor. Then in some senses representing Lusaka, but also sharing her broader views related to multi-level governance and climate resilience. We have Bawalya Ndolisha, and she's a senior community development officer and community engagement coordinator at Lusaka City Council. And looking at her bio, I was particularly interested to see that she has strong expertise linked to gender and social inclusion. This is an absolutely paramount issue that has to be dealt with when tackling multi-level governance, better incorporating gender, social inclusion, tackling inequality. And if these topics are not tackled when local and national government are engaging in terms of climate resilience, then we really are doing a disservice to our communities. So I'm sure she will have a chance to reflect on that. And she's also played a key role in things like the Lusaka Water Security Action Plan and the new water agenda, and has a lot of experience in unlocking the collaboration between city government and community members, which is absolutely vital. Then we have a good friend and colleague, Dr. Chipo Mubaya, and she's the manager of international collaboration at the Chinhoyi University of Technology. Chipo has extensive experience in understanding the Harare and the Zimbabwean context and how national and local government are working in Zimbabwe on climate resilience. I must say, in all our work as ICLEI Africa with Zimbabwe, we are blown away by the leadership being shown by this country in particular, in bringing local and national government closer together, and in developing cutting edge and nationally determined contributions and climate plans, etc. So Chipo will reflect, I'm sure, on that, but also in her experience in collaborating with ourselves at ICLEI Africa and UCT in the Fractal and the Impact Project. She really has been a long-standing colleague and friend of our organizations, and has lots to share, both in terms of her climate resilience experience, but also her experience particularly in the field of water, where she's a specialist. Then we have Dr. Kenneth Gondwe, and he is from the University of Malawi. He's a senior lecturer there. He has a long-standing and significant career working in the public sector, working in the private sector, working as a researcher and academic and leading thought leader. He's also done significant work with the national government in Malawi in progressing their climate change plans and actions, and he's worked very much at the city level in Blantyre. So this is a panelist that can really share from almost any sector and almost any tier of government. So we're particularly interested to hear the thoughts from Dr. Gondwe. Then our last panelist is Olamide Odomo-Ojo, and she's the director of the Lagos Urban Development Initiative. Lagos, as we all know, is a key city, not just in Nigeria, but on the continent. And we have always been very impressed with the work that's being led by the Ludi initiative, where Olamide is a director. She has a strong urban planning background, a lot of work in enhancing participation, again, between communities and city governments and national governments. And we look forward to her reflecting on some of the innovative ways in which these collaborations can be unlocked, and particularly looking at how planning forms the basis of us being able to move forward in climate resilient development, and particularly multi-level governance for climate resilient development. So how this afternoon's webinar will work is I'll really be posing quite open-ended questions to each of our panelists in turn. You'll then have 8 minutes or so to reflect on some answers, and then we'll move into our questions and answers segment. A final word from my side before we start off with Anna is just to say that we identified as ICLEI Africa the importance of multi-level governance for some time now as being paramount to our cities and sub-national government work. We often joke and say, for a city network, we're now doing more work than ever with national governments. And this is because we know that, particularly related to climate change, many of the mandates are held at the national government level, and national government also plays very much a key role in unlocking finance for sub-national government implementation. So our ability to enact real change at the city level related to climate and energy is only possible if local and subnational governments are collaborating well with their national governments. And so the different approaches on how to enable this and what methodologies are the best way to do this has been something we've been tackling with our partners, and in particular through the Impact Project and also the Fractal Project, and we'll hear some more reflections on both of those. So I'm going to turn to Anna first. And Anna, really, it's a very open-ended question to you, but I wonder if you could perhaps just reflect on your experience, perhaps a bit in the city of Cape Town, because you have done significant years of research in the city of Cape Town. That's really a leader on the continent and in our country, South Africa, in terms of climate action. What has been the ways in which the city of Cape Town has unlocked the potential through multi-level governance, and how is it engaging with its provincial and national government to do so? And then perhaps broader than that, you could reflect a little bit in terms of your other work in Southern African cities in particular, in terms of how paramount this multi-level governance aspect is for climate resilience. Over to you, Anna.
Thanks very much. Good day, colleagues. And thanks, Megan, for the generous introduction and the open question. First of all, I just want to remind, as Megan's emphasized the multi-level aspect, but the other dimension that I think is important to remember in relation to the multi-level governance framework is obviously the importance of collaboration, not just across levels or scales of government, but equally between government, private sector, representatives of civil society, NGOs, and the research or scientific community. And so my experience comes primarily from that interface between academia and government. So I think while talking a little bit about the different levels, that interface will be where much of my contribution comes. And so I want to suggest that the importance of multi-level governance relates to at least three aspects. The one is thinking outside of our boxes. So from whatever level we come or we primarily operate at, and from whichever of those sectors or spheres that we come from, the value of engaging in multi-level governance with other actors is that it enables us to think outside of our professional, institutional, organizational boxes that we tend to come at problems and solutions from. The second is it really promotes transparency, because by engaging outside of our kind of home spaces, we open up our thinking and our plans and our projects to engagement and scrutiny and questioning and suggestions from outside of our kind of usual sphere of orbit. And the third aspect that I think is critical, or why multi-level governance is so critical, is the one that's most often spoken about, which are partnerships for implementation. So when trying to tackle a problem as big as climate change globally, but at the city scale, we know that no one kind of actor can single-handedly provide the solution or even fully understand the problem. And so partnerships are essential to both the diagnostics of understanding what problems climate change poses to cities and what opportunities cities might hold for tackling climate change, and then moving beyond that into implementation, whether it's about pulling in different kinds of skills, whether it's about accessing new kinds of finance. So I think multi-level governance is critical to all three of those things. And then I want to map that onto at least three different modalities for engaging in multi-level governance, or engaging beyond whichever actor you represent. And I'm sure there are many more, but the three that I'm familiar with are exchanges of various kinds, and I'll give some examples from Fractal and Cape Town, but either staff exchanges or knowledge exchanges or city exchanges. The second is people or organizations who operate in intermediary roles. So the recognition that two often big actors, or a big actor and a small actor, so maybe city government and a university, or a university and a small local NGO, often struggle to collaborate meaningfully directly, and often the role of some body or some organization or some individual in an intermediary role who can be mandated to take on the kind of translation and relationship building that's required is really critical. So that's the second modality. And then the third modality, if I have time in 8 minutes, is this idea of convening spaces. So I think that's more familiar to people, the idea of setting up. We've worked with the idea of think tanks. People have spoken about city labs, learning labs, or various kinds of advisory committees where you get representatives from multiple layers of government or different kinds of organizations sitting together on a panel or a committee. So just to give a few practical examples of where those things intersect. So I think the thinking outside our boxes, that's really where these exchange relationships can work well. And so in the case of Cape Town, we had an interesting mechanism where we effectively had almost like a staff exchange between the city government and the university in Cape Town. And so we had researchers that became embedded in city government and worked side by side with officials and politicians on various climate matters related to renewable energy, related to coastal adaptation. But then equally, we had officials who formerly were given what they were called writing sabbaticals, but city officials were given 3 months to take a step back from their operational duties and to spend that time at the university paired up with an academic to write up some piece of work out of their practice and couch that in more conceptual academic thinking to publish as a piece. So what that enabled officials to do is to take a step back from the busyness of the implementation world and rethink or document some of what they have been experimenting with and innovating with in the city government, and put that out as a written piece in collaboration with an academic. And so that really pushed their thinking outside of their box, both for the academic involved and for the city official involved. In the case of Fractal, we facilitated exchanges of an academic, an official and a politician from one city, say Harare, and they visited their counterparts in Durban or in Windhoek or in Gaborone, and vice versa. And they would go and visit some of the projects that that other city was implementing, talk through some of the policies and the plans that they had in operation. And so that was really an opportunity to learn directly from each other about what was working in each of those cities. Sorry, I have a child knocking on my door, so I apologize if you can hear very loud knocking in the background. And then I'm watching the time. I know I only have a few seconds left, but just quickly on the convening spaces, maybe an example from Cape Town. You know, Cape Town went through this terrible drought, which was referred to as the Day Zero drought between 2017 and 2020. No, 2017 and 2019. Sorry, one sec. Sorry about that. Sorry, Megan, I see that was last few seconds. But just to say, in the height of the drought, the city established what was called the Water Resilience Advisory Committee. And that was an example of where a convening space was set up for representatives from other spheres of government, from academia, from the private sector, big engineering companies. And I think there were a couple of spots given to, for example, WWF. Oh, I see my videos off, sorry. And that is a great example of how having a monthly meeting with a mandated space to get input from actors beyond city government and to, in that case, really think about what are the possible solutions that could be quickly implemented to fend off the possibility of the city completely running out of water, created the space that enabled multi-level governance to really be operationalized. So I think I'll stop there, and if anybody wants to pick up on other examples, I'll take that in the Q&A. So thanks, and sorry again for the distraction.
I actually wasn't asking you to stop, and I was trying to step in while you had dealt with the knocking in the background. But thanks so much for those very clear and concise points. I was actually typing on our internal WhatsApp group. There's a think piece brewing there. Okay, so now I'm going to pose a question to Bawalya, who's joining us from the city of Lusaka. Bawalya, you work for a city government, so you are fully aware within your context the mandates that are housed within the city. And as Anna very rightly says, multi-level governance is not just about what we would call vertical integration, but also horizontal integration. I already see a question around silos. How do we break down silos within operations in a city, between government departments? How do we break down silos between government departments at the national government level? And even more than that, how do we work across different sectors? So government working with academia, working with the private sector, etc. So we would really love to hear your thoughts as a city stakeholder, as a city official, how you've been working on multi-level governance within your city, and then also with the various tiers of government in your country. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Megan. And it's interesting to hear what has been shared from Dr. Ann. And I just want to share our Lusaka experience. In Lusaka, we used to work in silos, and this had an effect on our planning and also implementation. But with the engagement of the Lusaka Water Security Initiative, we've seen the different partners coming on board, and we've been a partner of the Lusaka Water Initiative since 2016. And we sit and we identify the issues as different stakeholders, and we try to find solutions to those issues. Another example I can give is the Fractal project that was implemented in Lusaka, of which Lusaka City Council partnered with the University of Zambia. And from that, some of the outcomes that came out was the development of the policy briefs. And if you look at the priorities in the policy briefs, which look at urban flood management, groundwater pollution, they speak to the multi-level governance structure that has been, or the platform that has been created, which we're calling the Lusaka Water Security Initiative, where the different partners are coming together to identify the issues. And from the Lusaka perspective, I think the silos, we're trying to break the silos. I think through the same platform that I'm referring to, we've been able to work with different organizations, international organizations, public sector organizations, and also the government and international NGOs as well. So I think that's the only way to go, because the working on silos, firstly, it divides the resources within the cities, meaning you cannot achieve more. So when you bring in the resources, I'm not only talking about financial resources, but also human resources. So we've been able to build our capacities at different levels. And when it comes to engaging the communities at these platforms, we have community representations from each ward at least. And we've been working with the communities to try and find what are the priorities at community level, and also match them with government priorities. And we've done them through the community engagement project, and also when we're developing the local area plans in the 12 wards that were reflecting water security. And right now, as I speak, we've also been engaging the youth. The Lusaka City Council recently constituted the Junior Council. where we have junior councillors who are working together with the senior councillors. So we have a junior council that will be informing the senior council, or working together so that the youth voice is also heard. So that's the way we've been doing it, like in the recent past when it comes to breaking the silos. Not that we are at 100%, but at least we've seen improvements. We've seen groundwater recharge areas being secured, and we've also seen the 2 well fields, that's Shaft 5 and Mass Media, also being secured that supply water within the city. The other thing that we've been doing from the council level is engaging the politicians, because politicians play a major role when it comes to planning and decision making at city level. So they've been engaged, they've been trained in climate information, they've been trained in local area planning, they've been trained in water security, and now this has helped us to secure our groundwater, and also just to properly implement our plans. And because UNZA, or the University of Zambia, and other universities are part of these platforms, through their research, we are able to inform or share some of the findings with the politicians, where they are able to now make informed decisions based on research. And this has also assisted the proper or improve the decision making at political level. So those are some of the things that we've been doing. And in order to make all these processes gender or socially inclusive, we've ensured that when we're having these meetings, especially at community levels, we engage the different social groups. Sometimes we even go to an extent of dividing them so that people are free to speak because of cultural issues. Sometimes you find that you're in a community meeting and the women are failing to speak because the men are present. And this has assisted us to get input from each and every social group and how issues to do with climate change affect them. So this is what we've been doing. And of course, through this process, we've had a lot of expectations from especially from communities, and how we've managed these expectations is to plan with them. So we do the planning from inception level. We plan with them. We create partnership, and we also create joint action. And we also do resource mapping with the communities themselves, so that they are part and parcel of the process. They don't think it's a council or a local government owned process, but it's their process. And by the end of the day, we've seen plans being developed and the community using their own funds to implement some of these plans. And when it comes to maybe how do we bridge the gap between national and national government and ourselves, the council is basically the link between national government and the community. So we provide a platform where communities can come and speak. Communities can contribute to their own development, and also, as you may be aware, Lusaka or Zambia launched the decentralization policy, which gives the power for the people to implement. Of course, this policy comes with its own challenges, but we've managed to, or it's the first time that we've done planning from using a bottom-up approach, where you go to the communities, ask them what their issues are, identify their priorities. After we do that, we align the priorities with the government priorities and find synergies of how do we resource some of these priorities or develop projects from these priorities. So those are some of the things that we've done. And when it comes to partnerships, we've partnered with different organizations, international organizations. We partnered with GIZ, we've partnered with WWF, where we are reporting the carbon registry, which has also its own challenges because we don't have early warning systems systems, especially at community level. And also, we don't have to document some of these, especially the carbon print at local level. So those are the issues that we are facing, or the issues, or some of the initiatives that we are participating in order for us to contribute to the development of our city and also reduce the carbon print. So this is what we are doing as a local authority.
Thank you, Bawalia. Thanks so much in particular for giving us some tangible examples of actions that have been taken in Lusaka. I picked up a couple of things that I think are useful just to re-emphasize, one, managing the expectations well with community members by using transparency as a methodology we should all be adopting. I really think the idea of having youth councillors informing the more formal councillors makes a lot of sense, and I'm sure leads to some innovative actions being taken forward. And then the mechanics of how the decentralization policy is working in Zambia were also very interesting to hear, amongst other things. So I'm hoping we can dive into that in a bit more detail in the Q&A section. So very, very many thanks to you for joining us. I also see others in the chat are just thanking you so much for the information that you shared. Then we're going to go to Chipo Mubaya, and as said, Chipo's been working with us for a number of different years. In fact, her title makes her ideal for a webinar like this as International Collaboration Manager at the University of Chinhoyi. And so I'm sure, Chipo, that you'll reflect maybe a bit on your work in Harare and in Zimbabwe in particular. As mentioned in my intro, we know that Zimbabwe is leading the way in many other ways in terms of multi-level governance and involving local governments in national committees, committees to achieve the adaptation objectives, committees to achieve mitigation objectives, and have been very open to local government involvement, which is wonderful to see. But we also know that your experience is beyond Zimbabwe and Harare, and your work through Fractal and Impact, and you may want to reflect on that too, and maybe even how a university like the University of Chinhoyi is engaging in international collaboration to lead innovation on the African continent. So the floor is yours, Chipo, and thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much, Megan. Yeah, as you mentioned, we have been working in Harare. We worked on the Fractal and Impact projects with other partners, and we've been at this for the past 5 years, 6 now. And I think just to mention that when it comes to multi-level governance, I would like to talk about 3 aspects that in terms of enhanced outcomes coming from these multi-level collaborations. And the first issue I would like to highlight is the relational aspect of the whole concept, and how as the 2 projects managed to make a breakthrough in building and enhancing relationships amongst city stakeholders. And perhaps to also mention that in terms of climate change adaptation and building resilience for the city of Harare, before these projects came on board, there was very little on the ground in terms of engaging and having dialogues on climate change and so on. So this was really a breakthrough, and especially the beginning to build relationships amongst stakeholders, relationships in the context of climate change adaptation and climate change resilience. So this really has brought on board a number of stakeholders in the city, and this has enabled the collaborations. Different collaborations have started to come up, and they are now well defined through this 5-year journey that I'm talking about. And the second aspect that I would like to highlight is the one on capacity strengthening at institutional level, coming from the different collaborations that we've engaged in. For example, I've mentioned that collaborations are now more well-defined than before. But of specific interest is the creation of this platform for dialogue and the network that now exists, which was developed and further enriched as the years went by. And this platform is now quite an active platform where we have different stakeholders beginning to partner even in different aspects that were not the initial ones, and coming up with their own activities that relate to city development. So this platform is actually, in our view, quite an active platform, and this has helped build capacity for different stakeholders to engage and to continue to dialogue even in the absence of the two projects that I mentioned. And also the issue of the city of Harare, for example, coming up with plans, the local government coming up with plans to take the work forward, work to do with NDCs, for example, in the Climate Change Management Department in the ministry, issues to do with the city engaging with Environmental Management Agency. I'll give more concrete examples as I go, but that issue of actually being able to build that capacity to sit down and plan and come up with concrete activities and actions going forward is what was really, I think, for me, quite noteworthy. And also the issue that Anna highlighted earlier to do with experiential learning. This has been quite notable, especially from the academic point of view, given that before the projects were started, there was very little engagement in terms of identifying problems and coming up with solutions together with all stakeholders involved. This had not been done that much, if at all, before. So experiential learning for students coming on board and being embedded within the city and also within the Zimbabwe National Water Authority as part of the project actually enabled us as academics to kind of be able to bridge the gap between academia and practitioners and other stakeholders. So this I think is something that has really gone well as well in the projects. And the third aspect is the scientific and kind of academic thinking enhancement in terms of what came out from the projects, how we have managed to come up with concrete information on the different projects that have been going on in the city, and these were going on in silos. Other stakeholders didn't know what was happening elsewhere, but having this network and having this platform has enabled stakeholders to be aware of what is going on around the city and how they can contribute and even partner on activities. And this, I think, has also worked quite well in terms of also bringing a conceptual understanding and academic understanding of issues such as barriers and issues such as successes and how this can be leveraged on in terms of developing plans and building resilience for the city, and looking at the different products, knowledge products that also have come out of the process. So I think this is something that is also noteworthy for the projects that we've had. And I would also like to give specific examples of what I'm talking about in terms of the relational aspect. For example, we noticed that as we went, as the projects went by, the atmosphere kind of changed, where, for example, civil society were able to engage with the city officials, for example, in a meeting and discuss issues without pointing fingers and, you know, blaming each other on problems, but actually being able to discuss these problems and solutions in an amicable way. We saw this improve as the projects the projects went by. So this has been one example of what I'm talking about in terms of building relationships, but also the issue of capacity. I spoke about plans earlier on, specific plans such as the local government. Actually, last week we had an engagement. They were talking about how they have sat down to begin to plan about how they can then move out and upscale this and go into the many other different city councils across the country, but borrowing from the two projects that we've had, the Fractal and Impact projects, and how they can implement this in the different councils. So this is one example of such plans, but also talking about the city itself, them coming up, how the projects triggered and the collaborations triggered the setting up of an environmental management unit, and specifically a climate desk, which did not exist before. And now them coming together with other stakeholders to talk about how they can implement activities within the climate desk and make sure that everybody is on board. And also the city has within this period been able to then partner with the Environmental Management Agency and begin to talk about how they can come up with a wetland plan for the city of Harare. And this will help deal with issues of encroachment into wetlands and other related issues. So this is also one example of how the different collaborations have led to this. And the partnership agreements that have come up, one of them is an example of a partnership agreement between the city and the university, and the city actually going on to engage other universities, like the University of Zimbabwe, to come up with similar activities that are beneficial not only to them, but to students, to the community, and academia at large. And so I would say this, in short, is what has happened in terms of these collaborations and how outcomes have been enhanced, and what we see on the ground as a success story of engaging and bringing together different stakeholders and engaging at the same level. Thank you, Megan.
Thank you, Chipo, for all of those insights. Sure, you really covered the full suite of good collaboration and the fruits of good collaboration, which leads to meetings running effectively without blaming and antagonism, leads to policy changes, and leads to institutional mechanisms, like you mentioned, the climate change desk. So really so much to unpack actually in your inputs, and we really do appreciate them. Okay, then we're going to go to Dr. Gondwe, and Dr. Gondwe, we would really appreciate hearing about your experience. As I mentioned in my introduction of you, we're aware that you've worked at multiple levels of government within Malawi and within the university and private sector space. So there's, I'm sure, a richness of experiences that you can share with us in terms of how multi-level governance has occurred over the years and perhaps improved over the years in Malawi. And maybe if you have time, and if it's as part of your speaking notes, just some reflection around national government policies. You know, we see the world looking towards nationally determined contributions as the core planning document for countries in terms of their climate change commitments. And we've been trying as ECLI Africa and with partners, many of which are on this webinar, to ensure that these nationally determined contributions take into account the important and vital role of different sectors and departments, so horizontal integration, as well as subnational governments. And perhaps from your experience, you could share what have been some best practices in your context. The floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Megan. Now it's a pleasure to be part of this webinar. Basically, maybe I should start with a preamble. The city of Blantyre is a little bit unique in the sense that although it's standing alone as a city within the local government space, there are a lot of essential services that are not within the control and mandate of the city of Blantyre. So, for instance, water, energy, land belong to different entities within the city. Although the city owns maybe a bigger part of the land, but there's land that is owned by Housing Corporation. Another piece of land is owned by Ministry of Lands, and then water is owned by Blantyre Water Board, and then electricity by ESCOM and so on. So the city itself needs to work with these partners in order to provide essential services to its citizens. So as such, partnership and collaboration is supposed to be a core activity within the city of Blantyre. And what we've seen over the years is that as far as general planning is concerned, normally these institutions come together and do joint planning for the city. But when it came to cross-cutting issue like climate change, somehow it was iron and not core to the planning processes within the city. So I've lived in Blantyre over 30 years, and I'd never experienced a flooding in Blantyre. But in 2015, Blantyre city was flooded, and there was loss of life, loss of infrastructure, and the drainage systems proved not suitable for the kind of rainfall that we experienced in 2015. So that was a wake-up call to the city that they need to think outside the box. Unfortunately for us, also it was around the same time that Fractal came into being, and I was part of the first researchers who was involved in the Fractal issue. So the important issue that came that time was that Fractal provided a platform that the university was able to collaborate with the city authorities and made known to the city that indeed, as a city, we needed to plan for extreme climate events. And indeed, we were able to see that the city now are able to take on board in various planning processes. But also Fractal and the cross collaboration, horizontal collaboration helped to not only to increase the knowledge about climate change issues within the city, but also it provided access to other partners that were not core to the normal activities of the city. For instance, the university. We have now very strong collaboration with the city. They're able to consult us and advise them on various issues, but also they're able to access other institutions that are within the city. For instance, in the water sector, in the energy sector, and in so doing, the silo kind of planning that used to happen in the past is now a thing of the past. They are able to get these people at a phone call level and be able to engage them, which was very, very important. So I could say that from the horizontal collaboration, we've seen capacity being built, knowledge being shared, and the city is more welcoming and able to try to engage other partners for development purposes. Specifically speaking on Fractal and the impact project and other projects that we've collaborated as a country and also as the University of Malawi with the UCT and the ICLEI is the issue of transdisciplinary collaboration with different partners. We've been able to, through the projects, to get different partners to come and discuss important issues that affect our city. Some of the work related to transdisciplinary collaborations have been published in the refereed journals, and I think in a way, I would say the projects have generated important knowledge that is being shared regionally and globally. The concept of learning lab and the young researchers have enhanced capacity, but also they've built confidence when we bring together different partners and allow them to articulate important issues affecting our city. It has also formed friendships and partnerships which were not existing in the past. And as I say, in the way that the city is structured, unlike the district council, for instance, who seem to mirror the central government, the city somehow have got gaps. They do not one-on-one mirror the structure in the government. And in a way, sometimes they require expertise from the district council to support them. And through, for instance, the impact projects, we've seen issue of deployment of expertise from the district council supporting some aspects within the city, which is also, I think, a very good and a positive development. And more recently, through ICLEI, I was involved in I would say a short project where we were working towards supporting development of implementation plan and the mainstreaming guideline for NDC in Malawi. We were able to learn quite a number of things from the local government. Basically, the message that was coming out clearly that although the local government was being engaged, but maybe not engaged far enough as far as the developing of the NDC were concerned. But through Impact Project, we were also able to see that the partners that were involved in the project, they understood about NDC, and they were ready to engage the government in it because of the knowledge that I've learned about NDC through the project, and they were willing to contribute. In some cases, they did contribute, maybe indirectly, but they wished there was a platform where they could share a bit more. Because at the end of the day, the local government is what is going to implement the NDC once it is ratified. And then as a project, so we were trying to investigate on how best to identify entry points in which local government could engage the government. And for Malawi, the approach that is being used is that 5 years, the government developed a strategic document, which is it's a medium-term planning agenda for the country, and all the local government are supposed to draw their district development plans and city development plans from this document. And therefore, it is expected that the formulation or development of that document should be informed by the local government. And of course, if systems are in place, through the district development directorate, key issues about the districts are conveyed to the local government ministry. And the local government ministry, of course, informed the National Planning Commission. So we hope that the engagement that we had as we were working on the mainstreaming guidelines and the implementation plan, we were able to share with the government entities responsible for environment. And we hope that some of the key lessons that were learned will be included in the NDC and eventually in the National Development Plan as it's being revised currently. So once the NDC is included in the National Development Plans, it means that the voice of the local government has been incorporated, but also it's the basis under which the local government make their plans, and therefore it's a win-win situation if that is what's going to take place eventually. I think that's what I could say for the time being. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Gondwe. I really do appreciate all of your inputs. And in particular, I've seen a bit of a trend in some of our panelist discussions around these critical weather-related events that in some senses have been windows of opportunity for focused attention around climate change. But I also really appreciate your thoughts in terms of how policy progressions have been made in Malawi and in Blantyre. So thank you so much for your inputs, sir. Lastly, before we go into the question and answer section, I'd like to call on Olamide Odomo-Ujo, who is from, as mentioned, the Lagos Urban Development Initiative. And from your perspective, we would really be intrigued to hear what Ludi's experience has been working in Lagos, which is such a diverse and vibrant and diverse city in Africa, and in particular, how you've navigated the space of working between government bodies and community members and civil society and enabled much of the change that you have as an organization. So over to you, the floor is yours.
Great, thank you, Megan, and thank you everyone for joining and obviously inviting me. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some of our projects, as Megan has asked, and also at the end just talk about maybe some learnings through those projects and some other projects as well. So I'll just start with saying that Lagos is obviously a city-state. We have a federal government, which is deals with the whole of Nigeria. And then we have local government, which deals with more on the city scale. So as I said, Lagos is a city state, so we have smaller areas. And then even below that, we have CDAs, community development areas. So all these are the different tiers of government within Lagos. And other states don't necessarily have CDAs, but they do have federal, state, and city or local government, as we call it here. And so most of the projects that we have looked at are around NMT, transport as a last mile climate solution, and also supporting public transport while also looking at public space. And within our project, we've worked majorly with state government, focusing on advocacy around policies and laws, as well as direct implementation with local government. And so I'll talk about 3 of our projects, the Girls Bike Club, the Wetlands Campaign, and the Linear Project, and who we worked with and how we worked with different stakeholders within those projects. So the Girls Bike Club is a bike club within a community. And we realized after working with state government on the NMT policy that there was a gap. Most of the discussions we had, stakeholder engagement sessions and so on, we didn't have that many women attend. And in other projects, we realized we had some women, but very low percentage of women. And in other events, we also found out that when we had bicycles during our events, a lot of women wouldn't ride. So we asked them why. Why don't you ride bicycles? Why don't you kind of come to these events and so on? And a lot of women said they don't know how to ride bicycles. So we used this idea of a girls' bike club within Lagos Island community as a way to engage young girls on cycling, but also around accessibility and safety within their community. And we did try to work with local government to initiate ourselves into the community, but in the end, that actually was a challenge. We then worked with the Residents Association or the Community Association, which was a lot more engaging because they could see the direct impact to their children and to children within the community. However, local government didn't necessarily see a synergy between what their projects that they were doing that year compared to what we were trying to do within the community. So there was a bit of a clash between their own objectives and our own objectives. So I'll talk a little bit about what we've learned at the end. And so, local government at that point has a chairman, and each chairman looks at their political cycle. So their focus is more on political cycle. And there's also a lack of capacity within local government. So they can only really focus on certain things at certain times, which will, of course, the aim is to get voted in again next political cycle. And so that's the first project. The second project I'd like to talk about is the Wetlands Campaign. So here we worked with a local youth group and local government in a community called Owuroshoki. And we were able to work with both the youth group and the local government because they've worked together before, so they understand each other. And also our aims and objectives were quite similar. So the Wetlands Campaign was really looking at how do we preserve wetlands in Lagos? How do we collect data around wetlands preservation? And also trying to engage young people in this discussion because Nigeria has a majority young population, and so it's important that we engage young people in a lot of our projects that we do. And what we were able to do here was really hand over the project to this youth group within the community once it ended. So it wasn't that we were coming in and then leaving and there was going to be no continuation. The youth group were able to continue the work and have continuously engaged with the local government as well. Again, here we found that the local government had the capacity. They had a specific environmental department. So they were able to actually, support the project, and they understood what we were talking about. They understood the issues in the community, and so working with all three groups allowed us to work within the community as well as engage on different levels. We also engage with state government as well on this project. However, it was on a less impactful level, because the state government were not necessarily, their Ministry of Environment, which is at state level, wasn't as interested in they're interested in climate resilience, but not wetlands preservation at that time. They were interested in education, climate education. So unless we were able to align our goals and objectives of our projects with what they were doing, there was engagement, but it wasn't as impactful as it could have been. And the last project I'd like to talk about is the Linear Park project. So the Linear Park project is an 8-kilometer off-road bike trail, and it has recreational areas on the wetlands. So we're using it as a way to preserve the wetlands and also make it economically viable for Lagos State government. So it's quite a large parcel of land, and we do have a flooding issue in Lagos. So I think that the initiation of the project was at the right time, basically. It was, the initiation happened at the right time when there was, heavy rain. We have a rainy season here. So where there was heavy rain, and that was obviously on the top of mind of state government at that time. And so we did this hand in hand with a specific agency within Lagos State government. And we did a feasibility study where we worked with the community, where, we held, stakeholder sessions. We worked directly with, as I said, Lagos State government, as well as the community. And we actually brought them together on several occasions to discuss how we design, how we take care of this environment. And so in year 2, so this is actually also a very long project compared to the previous projects. In year 2, we were able to develop an interministerial committee. So we worked with different ministries and brought them together to discuss, again, how do we take this from a feasibility study to an actually implementable plan that works with the laws, the policies of the state, but also with the objectives of each ministry as they would have. And this was quite unique because it doesn't, people have mentioned about silos and so on. This is pretty much how the system works also here. And within, so it's not just about horizontal, but I've said vertical. And normally what happens is, so for example, when you're building a road, you go to Ministry of Works. You don't go to Ministry of Transport. But however, Ministry of Transport should be working directly with Ministry of Works to be able to they have a master plan and they are building roads. So they should be working directly, but we've heard in many instances that this doesn't even happen. So, so this was quite exciting for the state government officials that were in this ministerial committee, as well as us learning from this process. And so it was quite unique and exciting. And I think everyone has taken something from that in regards to how they work together with different ministries on different types of projects. And of course, with urban planning, you're looking at a really quite holistic, you're looking at transport, you're looking at environment, you're looking at housing, you're looking at urban development, urban regeneration. So there's quite a lot of ministries that would go into that kind of agencies that would go into doing that kind of project. And then just to end on the project stuff, we're now at the level where we have also partnered with a private institution to develop a business plan for this project. And again, a lot of the feedback we were getting from the state government was, how do we finance this project? This is such a great and we love it, and it's climate resilient, and looks at SDGs, and it ticks all the boxes. It also has social benefits as well as environmental benefits, as economic benefits. So we love the project, but how do we finance the project? And so we did a lot of work around the financing of the project. And now we're hopefully signing agreements with Lagos State government to actually see it implemented. So just to end my quick spiel on learnings, on what we've learned throughout these things, these projects. So I would say that in Lagos, we are not at the stage where collaboration is vertical or horizontal is a norm. It's not a norm. There still needs to be some hand-holding. There still needs to be some somewhat cajoling to work together. But it's important to align agendas because from the projects, when we don't align agendas, when we have a different objective, the other partner is not interested or doesn't have the capacity or the time to engage with on the project. And we've also seen, I worked in Abeokuta as well, and I've seen that they're now doing a draft transport policy, which focuses on local government, creating local transport policies. And so this is really strong because there's a policy that actually encourages both levels of government working together. And it's really positive in regards to, because this doesn't happen in any other state, as I mentioned earlier. And so it's really positive to see that multi-level happening from the state government and not from an external partner coming in and holding their hand. Then also they've been able to do a lot of city-to-city learning. So Lagos is, if in Nigeria, people would say we're jealous of Lagos if you're in a different state, because Lagos's policies, the way it works, the amount of tax it collects, and so on, is far above other states in Nigeria. So so we've tried to pair different ministries with Lagos ministries to also learn from what they're doing, and also try to encourage data collection, because we realize that data is something that isn't really being collected within ministries. And then also, we've tried to encourage like signing MOUs between urban renewal agencies and universities. Again, though we encourage such things, we haven't seen one being signed yet. And usually it's around, political will. Nobody wants to write anything, have anything written in stone, but they're happy to collaborate. So there is continuous collaboration, but nobody wants to sign a document that says we will collaborate with you on this project. And then just some key takeaways. So political will is very important. Who gains what? So it's really important to clarify, I'm from the Ministry of Transport, I'm from academia, I'm from private sector. Who is gaining what, and who is sharing what, and who is giving what. Really important to clarify that, so that everyone feels like they are gaining something from the process. Also to know that it takes time. So even though, as I said, we're still holding hands with some ministries and so on during projects that we do, it does take time to imbibe that culture of working together and collaboration. And then to make sure that needs from each group are within the project, so kind of say that who gains what, and also budgeting. So we've realized that budgeting, one major reason why a lot of ministries, a lot of different levels of governance don't work together is because of budgets. So we really have to think about how do we budget effectively where we can all work together. And then lastly, communication. So it's something that came up recently in a project that we're working on. And, we have so many great policies and laws, but then how do we make sure that at local government level, they understand what those policies and laws actually mean in terms of implementation? So how are we able to communicate with different levels of government and different stakeholders as well? So I think that's it for me. I hope it wasn't too long, and I made some good points, hopefully. All right, thank you.
You definitely did. Thank you so much for your input. Really appreciate it. Okay, so I've got a series of questions that we've drawn from the chat box or from the Q&A functionality. I must say we have some amazing panelists, because so many of the questions have been answered directly in the Q&A functionality, which is really, really great. But I'm going to start with Anna, and Anna, you're referring to what we can sometimes call knowledge brokers, the importance of organizations or individuals that are able to bridge at times what are divides between different sectors or different departments or different levels of government, as it were. My take is that historically these knowledge brokers have perhaps been slightly undervalued in their importance. We've had this previously, this focus on experts, specialists. So I just wanted to get your thoughts on what makes a good knowledge broker from your experience, and what are some tips for those of us that think that this role is really important and want to do more of this type of work.
Thanks, Megan. Yeah, good question. I think you're right. Knowledge brokering, and I wouldn't only say knowledge. I mean, I think other things are brokered too, maybe just brokering in general. And I call them intermediaries. Other people talk about boundary spanners, which is also useful, just this idea that often two parties are not well enough aligned to be able to meaningfully work together. So I think the characteristics that make up those people, before the characteristics of the individuals is, I think, something around the organizational mandate to play that role. So I think many more people play it informally and are good people and bridge builders, but often then they become constrained in how far they can take that because they don't have a sort of authorizing environment to take that work forward. So I think often the role of the intermediaries are supported, or the brokers are supported by the formal agreements that organizations go into to be intermediated in a way. So I think that, and it was interesting hearing our colleague from Lagos say, and I think that's probably true, it takes a while for organizations to be willing to sign up to these things because it's often very unusual or unfamiliar what that looks like. And so it's a bit risky often. And once it's kind of formally agreed to, their commitments involved. But then in terms of your question about the characteristics, one word that comes up so much amongst people who do that kind of work is empathy. So people who are good, not only at knowing various domains and being able to have a foot in many camps, but who can kind of empathize with where very different actors, stakeholders, representatives are coming from and start to build bridges, I think. So that quality of kind of empathy, in addition to the knowledge and the skills to translate between sort of technical domains or organizational practices, is important, I would say. And then obviously, I mean, there are two kinds of intermediaries. They're the individuals that get put, out of their home organization into a kind of host organization. That's one thing. But then just to mention, Cape Town, I think one of the great examples of an organization that's been set up to act as an intermediary is something called Green Cape, which was really set up about 10 years ago with investment from both the city government and the provincial government as an organizational to interface between the private sector and government to try and sort of understand what rules, regulations, financing things were inhibiting, particularly the uptake of renewable energy. And so it's important to remember that, I mean, in those cases, resourcing is also critical. Who's going to pay for an intermediary to be established to then hire in the skills and the capabilities to play that role? But they're already, Green Cape's already showing a huge return on that investments that governments, two spheres of government, put into establishing effectively a broker to help governments unlock some of what the private sector needs to be able to start investing in wind energy, in the bigger rollout of solar PV, those sorts of things. So hopefully that talks to your question a bit.
Yes, great. Thanks, Anna. That's awesome. I'm going to go to Bawalia next, and I know there were some responses actually to this question already in the chat, but I do think some verbal responses and additions might be useful. It was the question from Ryan Thomas that thanks the panelists for their inputs, and then speaks about the fact that it's his understanding that informal housing and infrastructure makes up a large part of the vulnerability in many cities. Household and community actions like small-scale infrastructure make up a significant part of the adaptation being implemented. And he's asking, how does multi-level governance as a form of urban management support informal practices of urbanization and adaptation? So he's really asking about multi-level governance and informality and how these intersect, and how one assists in dealing with the challenges of the other. So Bawalya, maybe you want to give a bit more context. I know you did do some answering in the chat function.
Yes, thank you, Megan. So I just wanted to mention that informality is a challenge, I think, for most African countries. And Lusaka is not exempted from it because 70% of our population is residing in informal settlements. And what we've been doing now is that we've been looking at the slum upgrading program, which is part of our master plan, and trying to find ways of upgrading these slums, because one, they lack the basic services like water, sanitation, and they're the most vulnerable when it comes to the impact of climate change. So in order to strike the balance, you need to work with them and make them understand some of these challenges, and also the continuous engagement, the continuous sensitization, the continuous planning with them or identification of issues is one of the strategies that you can use to mitigate some of these challenges. And I think it has worked well for certain parts, and it hasn't worked well because sometimes people think you want to completely replace them or remove them from the city. But it's an issue of engaging them and making sure that people are on the same page and they understand why you are planning like that as a local government when it comes to slum upgrading, and how or what are their benefits after that has been done. If you came to Lusaka 5-10 years ago, you notice that most of the places or the informal settlements did not have a proper road network. And the government has worked on the road, and that kind of planning is called the in-situ slum upgrading. The moment the road is done, somehow, somewhere, the people are housing, and also understanding that how the people can be part of that vision. So those are some of the strategies that we've used when it comes to Lusaka.
Thank you.
And
so
also
much.
the continuous sensitization. Yeah.
Thank you, Bawalya. Thanks so much. Sorry, you were just breaking up there a bit. So we put your video off, but I think we got the gist of your answer. Thanks so much. And thanks for also your written inputs. I'm then going to go to Chipo. I was in particular, Chipo, really interested in some of your reflections around how the ethos and the culture of engagement, particularly between government and civil society, that you saw a marked improvement in that over time. And I think all of us, or many of us in our engagements, have seen where you bring different organizations or sectors together. Sometimes the collaboration is not easy at first. There's different worldviews and different mandates, and it's really important to move those conversations to things that are constructive, but also to allow conflicts where they do lead to the necessary tensions that can enable more transdisciplinary thinking. So just to hear from you, Chipo, what you found in your experience were some of the key drivers that led to a shift in this culture and this ethos towards something more collaborative and constructive.
Okay, thanks, Megan. Yes, I would say that from my observation, I think the continued engagement process, in my view, may have worked towards, having that shift up to a point that up to now we really have civil engagement. Initially, I think the problem was that there really wasn't that much engagement in terms of understanding climate change issues within the city. there were other engagements, and when we started, there was a bit of, they were pulling away from each other. Sometimes it was difficult to understand, coming on board, blaming each other, even almost fighting, in meetings. But I think that continued engagement process where they continuously met and continuously shared ideas actually helped. And I think secondly, it might also have had a lot to do with having other stakeholders on board, which may not have happened that much before, because having other stakeholders on board also brought in a lot of ideas that may not have been there before, and kind of some kind of direction towards how those problems could be dealt with. And this made the discussions much lighter. And I think this also helped as we went through the process. So yeah, I would say that's a key lesson to take from that is once this engagement process starts, it's not there's no quick fix to it. It's a process that really takes time and that needs to ensure that we have the varied stakeholders touching on the different sectors available, and also ensuring that there is that continuous process of ensuring that they are continuously together and continuously sharing ideas. I think that helped quite a lot, I would say.
Thanks, Chipo. Very useful. Dr. Condre, we're going to come to you now. The question for you would really be to just unpack a little bit more your experience in straddling this world of academic and research institutions engaging with government agencies. There are many organizations that promote this type of work, promote university-government partnerships. And in our experience, we've seen it work really well, particularly in African cities, and also because there's a mutual respect. Government respects research institutions and academic institutions, and vice versa. And so this collaboration can be very fruitful. There obviously are some challenges in terms of timing, if you think of how long master's and PhD research projects take. But maybe just a bit more reflection from your side in terms of how we can get university research and government partnerships working well in African cities.
Okay. Now, I think the beginning point, of course, is to have clear terms of reference in terms of what area of collaborations you are going to engage in, because the government normally would like to work in structured manner, maybe open, orderly, and then as researchers also we need to ensure that we identify areas that are prioritized by the government, maybe through the national development plans. Let's say, like for Malawi, we are talking about Malawi Growth and Development Strategy 3, but also areas of collaboration that the relevant departments, like Environmental Affairs Department, so that you are able to build on synergies with the government efforts in addressing very specific problems that affect our communities, our society, and as our country in general. And currently, especially for a developing country like Malawi, the issue of adaptation are very, very crucial, and the building of resilience at the community level. So these are some of the areas that the government is interested in, as well as academia that are interested in to work with the government. Issues of funding, of course, are a challenge, and therefore we need to develop partnerships. Let's do through agencies like development partner like United National Development Plan, UNDP, GIZ, maybe USAID, and other agencies, so that they could support in terms of funding the various research areas. As regards the identification of potential students, I think as an institutions, we have built capacity now to train up to master's and PhD levels in various climate change related areas. And we look forward for opportunities of engagement. Specifically to local government, I think when we had two of our colleagues as the young researchers working with the city, I think we're able also to establish very good rapport and understanding. And understanding, I think, and collaboration, open door policy are key to ensuring that you're able to build in collaboration with the local council. Yes.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Dr. Conde. Appreciate those inputs. Last question that we have time for before we close is for you, Olamide, and I'd like to refer to, I see you typing an answer, but I'm going to ask you it actually live, from Charles, who says, how are the gender groups you mentioned engaged with city policymakers in Lagos? Do you have a formal or informal dialogue platforms or spaces each gender group can utilize to share policy messages? Would you like to respond to that to all the participants?
Sure. So no, we haven't created. Okay, so I'll start with what we did previously. So previously, what we would normally do is host stakeholder sessions. So we would go to the stakeholder session with the government officials, which is a little bit more formal. They have, different CSOs, larger international organizations that may come, and maybe a disability group would come and be represented in that stakeholder group. And so what we would also do is have a session, depending on who is missing from that formal stakeholder group. We would then have several sessions with other stakeholders, for example, women, the informal sector, also low-income communities. This is a community-focused project that the ministry is working on, or a ministry is working on, and sometimes we even had private organizations join stakeholder group discussions. But what we've now done, especially with gender, is we're starting a female network, really looking at women within the urban field. And trying to bring them together to discuss these policies that are happening in state government. And what we then would do is put together a policy paper and share it with the ministry that is involved or that is coming up with the draft policy at the time. So that's normally how we have worked and how we're trying to continue working. And it just means you have to have a continuous relationship with the ministries so that when they receive your policy recommendations, they're not just throwing it in the bin. They actually take it seriously and try to at least change some and implement some of the things that you suggested.
Thanks so much. So I'm going to make sure we end on time. I want to say a very big thank you to all the panelists for making time to speak today. We've just decided in the wake of this webinar that we do think an article capturing some of the key learnings and lessons that have been shared is necessary, and we'll share that with the participants of this particular webinar. I want to alert attention to our next webinar within our series, which is focused on nature. So African cities acting for nature, that's happening on the 18th of May. I also want to invite everyone that's attending today's session to join us in our Rise Africa showcase event, which is also coming up in May, and the next slide will give you a website to go and check out to join this really innovative event in which we're going to do things very differently. I think there'll be a lot less panels like today's session was, to get different sectors of society engaging and talking about the future of Africa. So please check out Rise Africa. And then I do just want to encourage those, my colleagues did share in the chat function the websites and resources for both the Impact Project and the Fractal Project and the SEMCA project, because these are the cities where we're implementing these programs, and all three of those projects I think are offering some really useful lessons in unpacking multi-level governance. And two key outputs that will be launched pretty soon, I'd say in the next 2 to 3 months, is one, a guidebook or a guideline on multi-level governance for climate resilient development that will be coming out, and we'll send it through to this group as soon as that's launched. A online training module, so very interactive training modules that you can guide yourself through as self-learning, or can be facilitated by ourselves on enabling multi-level governance for climate resilient development, that also will be launched in the next 2 months or so, as these 2 key outputs that I think can bolster some of the discussions that we've had today during this webinar. So without further ado, I'd like to thank you all for your attention. Please reach to us at any time at ICLEI Africa for any more informational resources and if we can support your work in any way. And once again, a big thank you to our panelists for your time today, and good afternoon.